Welcome to Where is Truth? So glad that you have joined us. My name is Norman Peckham, and I have with me Dr. Ariel Roth, scientist, biologist, lecturer. We're so glad that you could be here with us. We're going to start the beginning of a three-part series called The Great Genesis Flood. And this one is the introduction to that three-part series. Probably very little has engendered as much emotion and consternation in the scientific community as the notion of a worldwide Genesis flood. Ariel, why is that such a terrible problem for them?
Well, this lies at the core of the issue between creation and evolution. Evolution proposes that things evolve, life evolved gradually over billions of years. Creation speaks of God creating things just a few thousand years ago in a 6-day creation. And you can see why there's an immense conflict here. Time is the issue here that comes forth in this conflict here, but there's a lot more involved than just time.
Would the notion of billions of years a priori exclude God?
It doesn't exclude God, doesn't have to exclude God, but it certainly tends to challenge the kind of God that we have in the Bible. The Bible describes the creation by God. Everything that He does is very good. We look in the fossil record, as you have here, and we see some things that aren't very nice, like Tyrannosaurus rex in the upper right-hand corner. You can see towards the upper right-hand corner. And this creates a conflict that many are unaware of. If we have evil or predation from Tyrannosaurus rex or from plesiosaurs or other animals and so on, this is not the kind of creation that we would consider to be very good. And this happens, according to the standard long geological ages, before man. Man is supposed to be the cause of sin. And if you put him 70 million years later than Tyrannosaurus rex, he is not the cause of this evil that some see in the fossil record. So you can see that there's a conflict here in this issue.
Right.
Might point out that not all the fossil record is included in the flood generally by creationists, but most of it. We have here a picture of the Grand Canyon, and you have a red arrow down there towards the left, and you see that that's where we have this Cambrian explosion that we've mentioned earlier. This Cambrian, and there good fossils show up. You have some few fossils below that could be infiltration and so on, but in general, the upper part above that red arrow is what we say was involved in the flood, and there are layers above this type thing. But in most of the fossil record, we would say, represents the flood and the destruction of God's creation. In contrast to that, of course, evolutionists propose that things evolved slowly over billions of years, and you can see the conflict between these major views regarding what may have happened in the past, and it's an entirely different outlook. One is things evolved over a long time. The other one, God created recently.
Mm-hmm. Here we have a quotation from Genesis 6, 5 to 7. Let me read this. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. It sounds like there was some emotion involved here.
Yes, and I think this, sometimes we get the picture, well, God, he destroyed the earth, and we think it's not very nice. He was forced into this. This was something he regretted, something that grieved him. And I think a God who would send his son to earth here would certainly is doing all he can to save us.
To save, sure, yeah.
And obviously this was not something that he wanted to do, but he had to do it because the world had become so wicked.
Evolution in more recent years has come to kind of accept a lot of catastrophism, a lot of sudden happenings that they didn't before. And they present the idea that the flood was a local event. Deal with that a little bit.
Well, a local flood is one way of getting rid of a recent creation. By this, if you have millions of years of evolution and over the world, various places, and then just a local flood, this local flood does not answer for those layers that you have in different parts of the world. And hence, it is not the biblical model of a worldwide flood. And it also kind of destroys the six-day creation because you've got lots of different things being created over long periods of time, before that.
So the gradualism notion that has been prevalent for so many years, with the new information, they almost have to bring in some catastrophism of some kind, and so they propose it as a local event to let it in and still keep the long ages.
Right. But this is not what the Bible suggests at all.
No, the Bible suggests something quite different in Genesis 7:19 to 23, as you pointed out here. In verse 19, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. That's a lot of them. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, and all that was in the dry land died. And every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground.
You know, Genesis could not have been more explicit. Some say, well, you can interpret this a little bit this way and that way. These are all-inclusive statements. There's no question that the writer had in mind something that was worldwide.
Yeah, so this isn't local flood talk in the Bible.
Right, right.
Is the notion of creation dependent on a flood story?
Yes, I think so. When you become acquainted with a fossil record, you realize that the creation account is dependent on the flood. It is the flood is the event that harmonizes the fossil record with his 6-day creation. And the idea is God created in 6 days. We have these things. Then this fossil record came as a result of this worldwide flood. Because of man's weakness, God had to do this. And that's why the flood is so important in this story.
So as an evolution and a creationist go out and stand together on the edge of the Grand Canyon and look at the fossils and everything there, one has one set of glasses on it that can explain that on the basis with a flood. The other one has glasses on and they explain it on the basis of long ages of time.
And we might mention the flood's a very important issue in the Bible. It takes 3 chapters in Genesis, while the creation story only takes 2. And we have it referred to by God in other places in the Bible. We have it referred to by Paul, by Peter, by Christ. All the leading personalities of the Bible believed in that flood. Yeah. It's an integral part of the whole Bible, actually, a very important thing as you consider the past history of life on earth. God himself in the 10 Commandments spoke about creating in 6 days.
Yes. And in Genesis 1:2, God creates the various forms of life all within 6 days, each day its own evening and morning. Makes it pretty specific, doesn't it?
It is. Now, a lot of Christians interpret the Bible and the Genesis account as being allegorical. And they say, yeah, God created over billions of years, or he used evolution over billions of years. But it would be a strange kind of God who would create over billions of years and then ask us to keep the Sabbath holy because he did it all in 6 days. This does not make sense. And you cannot say, well, just Genesis 1 to 11 is allegorical and the rest. This Ten Commandments are much later in the Bible, and hence do not represent something that you can easily exclude as done by some scholars.
Right.
If you put time in that fossil record, there is no way you can have a 6-day creation. Why do I say that? Because you have different kinds of fossils at different levels in the fossil record, as we showed earlier.
Yes.
And if one fossil is created millions of years earlier than another one, there's no way God did it all in 6 days.
That's right.
In this picture, for instance, of the Grand Canyon, you have 2 arrows there. You can see the lower arrow points at supposedly 550 million years. You got trilobites there. The arrow a little higher up points at about 300 million years. There's 250 million years between these. Now, at the lower arrow, you've got trilobites. The upper arrow, you got ferns. You don't have the reverse. If there's 250 million years between these, God didn't do it all in 6 days, as he says he did it in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
And we could illustrate this over the world, just a map of the world. We've got fossil records, partial fossil records, and so on. It's true, it's not complete anywhere, but well represented in various parts of the world, including Antarctica, clear down at the bottom of the picture here, and so on. Australia, Greenland, so on. We've got the fossils are represented, and the fossil records are represented there, and we have different kinds of fossils at different levels, and there's no way, unless you have a worldwide flood to explain this, that you can reconcile the fossil record with the 6-day creation.
Aren't geologic changes, though, slow? As we look out today, aren't geologic changes slow?
Well, this is true. Nothing's happening now, except when we get an earthquake, or we get a tsunami, a worldwide flood.
That'd speed things up.
So, Genesis flood, this worldwide flood, was an astonishing event. Difficult to imagine because it doesn't occur right now, but we have evidence for that, and we'll be talking about later on regarding that. But things can happen very rapidly. For instance, right here we've got Kanab Creek. You see the red arrow in the diagram.
Yeah.
Below that red arrow, there's about a drop of about 50 feet there. That change, that dropping of 50 feet, occurred in 8 hours by erosion during a flash flood in southern Utah. And so, I mean, things can happen very rapidly. You can, if you've got enough water, things are going to happen very rapidly. And that's what the flood is all about.
So what we're saying here, what we see on this local area of things happening very quickly, if you had enough water, as in a worldwide flood, you might have these kinds of changes that are huge and would make a Grand Canyon. Absolutely, very easily. Geologists for millennia actually believed in catastrophes, and then about 2 centuries ago, suggestion was made, no, we'll accept only small changes over a long period of time. And then about 50 years ago, they reversed themselves again, and we are into a period where catastrophes are again accepted in geology. But evolution developed at this time when people didn't think very much about the flood. They were thinking about long, geologic, very slow changes. And this is all part of this history of how science changed its viewpoint. It's a reversal from a reversal. But the reversal, our latest reversal, is bringing back basically what was believed a long time before. Absolutely. And there have been definite studies indicating there's a major change in thinking where now catastrophes are acceptable. Yeah, and Dr. Kaufman, a paleontologist, he writes in the journal Science, It's a great philosophical breakthrough for geologists to accept catastrophe as a normal part of Earth history. That's right. This reclaiming of what was believed a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah. And Dr. Egger at the University College of Swansea, now that's in England, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He said, the hurricane, the flood, or the tsunami may do more in an hour or a day than the ordinary processes of nature have achieved in thousands of years. The periodic catastrophic event may have more effect than the vast periods of gradual evolution. So this is more of the geologic scientific community coming back to the notion of catastrophe.
Yes.
As opposed to just gradualism all the time.
Now, these folks all believe in billions of years here. They put a lot of catastrophes in the fossil record, and they will put a lot of time between the catastrophes, which preserves their long ages. But the catastrophes are where things really happen, and evidence of a worldwide flood, of course.
The profound role of major storms throughout geologic history is becoming increasingly recognized, again from GeoTimes, a very recognized journal.
Absolutely. And throughout geologic history, this is just what we'd expect, more or less, from the Genesis flood, that we'd have evidences of these. The flood took a year, you know, but it was a steady catastrophe, and you would expect to find that, and this certainly supports that idea.
Do we really know what happened during the Genesis flood?
I'll have to say no. We really don't know. We know in general some things, but the details, there are a number of ideas that's been discussed at length among creation scientists, but the details, some suggest very different models. Exchange of the continents and the oceans, for instance. Maybe the Earth expanded and contracted during the flood, or vice versa. Or maybe the continents sank down during the flood. But we know there was a lot of water activity. And water erodes, tends to erode. And you have a picture here of a hillside in Utah, and arrow points to erosion. That's a soft area, and the material is carried by the rain down to the areas, the flat area is called deposition. Sediments are usually down in a flat pattern, and that's the way you find them. But when they get moved up and down, as we see changes that occurred after they were deposited.
Okay.
So we have a lot of erosion, a lot of deposition during the flood. Fossils, organisms are caught in it, they become fossilized, and we have our fossil record as a result of this. This is a model of the idea that the flood was sinking down of the continents during the flood, and then they rose back up. We have cross-sections of part of the Earth for 3 stages of this model. The top figure, figure A, is a suggestion how the Earth may have been before the flood. Keep in mind this is speculative, but it gives us something to think about and to try and test and so on. You notice seas at different levels, and this explains why we find marine organisms at different levels. The largest areas you see in those figures, which are kind of cross lines at different angles, so on, represents the granitic base of the continents and so on. Figure B, which is the second one down, is during the flood. There you have the continents have sunk down, the oceans have come up. You have water pouring from the oceans onto the continents. You have
water.
Water from the various seas at different levels, pouring their water and their accompanying sediments into these depositional basins, which is the big basin you see in the middle there with the arrows going in from various directions. And then later on in the flood, you have the post-flood situation, which is the third figure, C. And there The continents rose back up. There was probably some lateral correction, according to the plate tectonics model, which we're not sure is correct. And the layers got bent around. Water ran off, eroded part of them, left part of them there.
So you can see them.
So we have this configuration, and it's what we have at present. Note that in Part B, the top one, the water covers the whole Earth.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what we would expect during this is just one model.
Now, we get the flood story out of the Bible. So is the whole notion of the flood tied to the Judeo-Christian Bible, or is it wider than that?
Well, it's very much tied to the Judeo-Christian Bible. I mean,
but if it was a worldwide flood, wouldn't people in all the world have stories or legends about that?
Of course, this is a very interesting point you raise here, because it's a very unusual thing, and we can state very plainly, if you want to study the flood, you do not have to look at the Bible at all. There is so much folk literature that's been gathered, different languages, different cultures, manuscripts, and the flood story very much dominates that. Here's a picture of the world, and the black dots represents where there are some flood stories. There are actually 270 flood stories. Just a few of them are mentioned here, but you can see the distribution is pretty worldwide. Now, some people say, well, could these just be local floods? And yes, they could be, because, people didn't have communication. They didn't have the ability to check by telephone with their friends in other continents to see if there was a worldwide flood or not, and so on. So often it's stated, well, these could be local floods. But there's some data that seems to suggest this is not possible, because we have such a tremendous dominance of these stories. Here we have a slide telling you about how different stories of calamities are distributed in the folk literature. This is from Steve Thompson's monumental 6-volume review of the folk literature of the world. And he's classified this literature into 33,000 categories. I mean, it's just a tremendously scholarly reference. But when Steve Thompson classified world calamities, not end of the world, but past world calamities and so on, he gave references for each one, of course, how it was obtained and so on, and showed a tremendous dominance of flood stories. For instance,
so now, if we're talking about little events like a local flood, then it would have to be in competition with other natural events like fires and bad weather and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly. And you'd expect kind of a even distribution of things.
Right.
You can see from this list, flood stories. He has 122 references in his index. Fire, only 19. I mean, it's a tremendous drop. And his continuous winter, 6. Large stones, 2, and so on. Earthworm, or just isolated stories here. But the thing that is so striking about this is that we have this tremendous number of flood stories. Drought is not mentioned. Pestilence is not mentioned. The volcanoes are not mentioned. Earthquakes are not mentioned. Why this dominance of the flood story? If these were local things, you'd expect a fairly even distribution of these stories.
Yeah.
No, we get this tremendous dominance of flood stories, which says, hey, really, this thing probably really happened, because so many cultures in the world have this story.
Have this story with
and
them.
it dominates over all kinds of other calamities that you may consider.
Yeah. Science now accepts catastrophes as part of Earth's history. For a couple of hundred years, science, modern science, relegated that to a nonsense. It was all gradualism. And now we're going back to, we've come back, and catastrophe, although thought of as local, is now part of Earth's history according to mainstream science. The Bible and folk literature of the world both speak of a worldwide flood. And we are going to study the flood again. Next time we're going to look at the bones and the rocks. We're going to begin the study of the fossil record. See you next time for Where is Truth?
If you would like additional free information about these discussions, there is a PowerPoint resource available on the internet that covers many more details than could be provided in this lecture series. The resource is titled The Bible and Science and is available at scienceandscriptures.com. Be sure to add an S at the end of the word Scriptures to get to the right web page. The Bible and Science resource follows the same sequence of topics as the Where is Truth series, but it is divided into 17 separate discussions instead of the 14 videos of the Where is Truth series. The title of the discussions, an introductory outline, and an index will lead you to the topics you want. The Bible and Science discussions served as the resource for the Where is Truth videos. To facilitate understanding and learning, each of the 17 PowerPoint discussions in the Bible and Science resource is provided with a set of questions and their answers. You will find these at the end of each PowerPoint presentation.